Help me, Doctor, please! I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Michael Landon in a powerful performance as the boy possessed. Yvonne Lyme, appealing as the girl who loves him. Whit Bissell, unforgettable as the scientist maddened by the mystery of the werewolf. And Tony Marshall, a tough, friendly enemy.
These are official pictures?
Yes, Chief.
Slash on either side of the throat. You got any theories?
Fangs.
He was killed by a werewolf.
Panic penetrates every home when this strange, unknown killer hits town, taking hold of the teenage crowd, coloring their practical jokes with hysterical humor that'll make you fall flat on your face with horror.
No. Remember how wonderful it was when you sprang and suddenly dug in with your fangs, a soft throat, the gush of warm blood?
No! No!
Nothing you've ever seen has such blood-chilling savagery. Nothing you've ever conceived packs such a spine-tingling jolt. This high school boy, a teenage werewolf, a constant threat of claw-ripping attack to everyone, to the brave and the beautiful.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
They're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're going to make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hello and welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Jeff Markin.
And I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And on this episode, we are taking a look at I Was a Teenage Werewolf from 1957.
What a great title.
It is a great title.
It began life as a title and not as an idea or a script.
How's that?
Well, this is from Samuel Arkoff, founder of AIP, about his partner, James Nicholson, who said he would come up with a great title in the morning. And I would be amazed because that's $1 million idea for a $100,000 picture. And this is one example of that.
I Was a Teenage Werewolf was directed by Gene Fowler Jr.
in his directorial debut, although he did go on to direct It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World.
And he was formerly a film editor.
Good for him for getting a promotion. The screen credit for the writing is by Ralph Thornton Jr., but that was actually a pen name for Herman Cohen, who produced an Aben Kandel. In the early years of AIP, Herman Cohen was a big part of the production team. He did a lot of their films.
The film stars Michael Landon as Tony Rivers.
It's in his first movie. This is his, obviously we know him from Bonanza and Little House on the Prairie and Highway to Heaven.
This is pre-Little Joe,
yeah,
Michael Landon.
It's his film debut.
Yvonne Lyme as Arlene Logan,
who will also appear in AIP productions of High School Hellcats and Drag Strip Riot.
The great Whit Bissell as Dr. Alfred Brandon.
He returns in I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, which is the sort of sequel to this movie.
Malcolm Atterbury as Charles Rivers. Barney Phillips as Detective Sergeant Donovan. Robert Griffin as Police Chief Baker. Joseph Mell as Dr. Hugo Wagner. Louise Lewis as Principal Ferguson. Guy Williams as Officer Chris Stanley.
Guy Williams from Lost in Space and Zorro. I was excited to see him.
Tony Marshall as Jimmy. Vladimir Sokoloff as Peppy, the janitor.
Vladimir will return in Beyond the Time Barrier for AIP.
Ken Miller as Vic.
The musical Ken Miller also will appear in Attack of the Puppet People.
Cindy Robbins as Pearl. Michael Rugas as Frank.
Who will appear in the movie Chomps for AIP.
And Dawn Richard as Teresa.
Dawn Richard, a Playboy model.
Now, the film opens up with a fight.
Yes, and in the tradition of all high school fights, there's an audience who are egging them on.
A police car pulls up and breaks up the fight.
The fight is between two people, Tony and Jimmy, as you can hear from the crowd sort of saying, "Give it to him, Jimmy, he's got it coming." And one woman saying, "Tony, stop." So the cop comes and he takes Tony and Jimmy off to the side, and sort of all the kids disperse when they hear the police siren coming.
And they try to investigate a little and see what started this fight. And it turns out that Jimmy gave Tony like a tap on the shoulder, and it set him off.
Yeah, Tony went ballistic because he doesn't want to be touched. And even though Jimmy tried to apologize, Tony wasn't having it. And Tony slugs Jimmy, starting the fight.
Yeah, I think Tony might have some
anger management issues.
Emotional problems.
Yeah, he's got a hair trigger. The police officer, Sergeant Donovan, says that, this is like the 6th time I've come, to kind of break up these fights. You really need to get it under control. And Tony is just, he's just emotionally adrift. He's angry all the time. He doesn't know why. And his response is...
He's a rebel without a reason.
Yeah, I think they should make a movie about that. His response to any sort of provocation is to lash out.
So Donovan is going to let this go as kids being kids, as long as they agree to shake hands, because it'll look better in the report.
Yeah, and Tony's principal is also concerned about him. She's aware of all the trouble that Tony's caused. So the cop has a recommendation. Sergeant Donovan recommends that Tony see a psychologist named Dr. Brandon that the police have worked with in the past with, helping out troubled teens.
He has a method of hypnosis that Donovan believes could be helpful for Tony.
So Tony hears the word hypnosis and starts to flip out again. He doesn't want to be head shrunk. He says that's for flips and goofs. I guess that's sort of like the jive talk of the day.
So later on, Tony is talking to Arlene, his girl, and he mentions that he was asked to see this Dr. Brandon.
I think she's kind of in favor of the idea. She doesn't push it on him right now, but she's like, well, maybe you should. You're kind of hot-headed.
And yeah, she thinks, she realizes that he's a person in need of help.
Right. And, she likes him, as she'll declare later.
I like him.
I like him a lot. So she likes him and she wants to keep dating him, but this is obviously, problematic for her. He takes her home, and then he goes to his home, and his dad is there. His dad has to work nights. His mom has passed away, so it's just him and his dad at home. His dad has made him dinner, put it in the fridge.
Lamb chops in the icebox.
Yes, and he says, don't eat it raw like you did that hamburger yesterday. So given the title, that's sort of a clue, right?
You think he actually ate them raw, or do you just think he barely cooked them?
How would he even know if he wasn't there? I don't know. Maybe there just were no dirty dishes.
Oh, maybe he got food poisoning and had to go to the...
Maybe he didn't even prepare it. He just noticed that there's a package of raw meat missing from the fridge.
Yeah, there were no pots and pans in the sink, because Tony doesn't do dishes.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Tony also doesn't pour milk because after his dad leaves, he takes a jug of milk out of the fridge and he kind of contemplates it for a second, and then he just hurls it against the wall where it breaks into a million pieces.
Call back to earlier when he was accused of throwing milk at somebody at
a checker at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was another example of Tony's hot-headedness. He got overcharged at the grocery store, and instead of letting the cashier, settle it, he just threw a carton of milk at him. So boy's got problems. He probably should have got picked up for that one, I think.
So later that evening, Tony pulls up to Arlene's house to pick her up, and he blares on the horn to get her attention.
Yeah, but the POV here is, though, Arlene inside the house with her mom and dad. Her parents are very conservative. Mom strongly favors Eleanor Roosevelt, in my opinion. And dad is just sort of grumpy about, these modern boys who just honk for their girls and don't come in and meet the parents.
But Arlene's impressed that he's not late.
Yeah, because I guess he's got a problem with that. And yeah, mom's like, well, I guess you trained him well. Like, good dog.
So her dad would like to have a few words with him because he's not pleased with Tony's lack of manners.
So Arlene yells out to Tony to come inside, and Tony kind of shuffles in. He looks really uncomfortable. And
he's very defensive right off the bat for no reason.
Well, there kind of is a reason, because the dad starts laying into him right away, like, in my day, whatever. Just sort of like, come in and talk to me like a man and don't just honk for her. And then Tony gets like extra defensive and says, well, it's because you guys are always lashing out at me. I'm expecting you to come at me with a baseball bat.
Oh, I'm sure that's just your imagination.
That's what Mom says. But, they're kind of hostile. At least Dad is kind of hostile. And Mom is kind of passive-aggressive. So I can kind of see why he wouldn't want to come in. Arlene seems nice, though.
Yeah, she's a sweetheart.
That's kind of the point.
So as Tony and Arlene head back out to the car, they're having a discussion about Tony's anger becoming an issue again as he lashed out at her parents. And she begs him to reconsider going to see this Dr. Brandon.
And Tony's not going to commit to that now. So it's Halloween, and they're headed off to a party with the gang at a, I'll put this in air quotes, haunted house that Tony discovered. It's better than the youth center with all the people supervising. So it's just a bunch of teenagers unsupervised. There's music, there's dancing, there's a clown.
They appear to be at a lower level. They go downstairs to get to this, and it's decorated kind of like a old garage with signs everywhere.
Yeah, I was wondering if they stole all the street signs.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's a whole gang of people, music playing.
Lots of dancing.
One person in costume.
Vic playing the bongos.
Yes, Kenny Miller is basically lightly brushing the tops of the bongos, and that really impresses the whole gang. Who think that maybe he should be a professional musician.
He came to the party with Pearl, and she is the one dressed as a clown because she thought everybody was going to come in costume, and she's the only one in costume.
She's really adorable, though. I like her. She's funny. Pearl wants to dance with her boyfriend, Vic, but Vic is too busy grooving with the bongos. So he shoves her at the only single guy there, Frank, and says, "Here, you take her," basically. It's like kind of possessive and rude and
he's
entitled.
Possessive of those bongos. He's not going to let anything stand in his way.
Yeah.
Except for one thing, because he's invited to sing.
Right. They play an instrumental record and announce that Vic is going to bless us all with a song, which he does.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
It's a classic tale of a man seeking a rich wife that he can divorce and get alimony from. It's pretty funny. Oh, fun fact here. This is the first time in a horror film that a song was included. So Kenny Miller is the first person to sing a rock and roll song in a horror movie.
Rock and roll-ish.
Well, I mean, come on. They're bopping to it. So let's call it a rock and roll song.
Now, being that this is a Halloween party, there are treats and there are definitely tricks. Pranks abound at this party.
Yes, many japes and shenanigans. The first trick, I think, is the kids tell Pearl that they have a gift for Vic, and it's in the closet, and they want her to give it to him. So she opens the closet, and out falls Frank with a knife in his back. But it's just a joke. He's pretending to be dead to scare her. Pearl was complaining about all these tricks. Vic sneaks up on Pearl with a mask and scares her again.
And this is quickly followed by the opening of a box of spring snakes. Then it's Vic's turn because Tony asks him if he can play big drums as well as he plays the bongos.
Yeah, and Vic's all like, "You know it, man. I'm even better on the big drums."
So Tony sends him toward the other room where the big drums are. But instead, Vic finds himself with water dumped all over him.
Yeah, classic trick. Dump a bucket of water on their head. Now, this is Halloween. I don't know where where the city is. Is it California? But, I mean, it's October 31st is pretty late in the year to be getting drenched with water.
So to get him back, Vic blows a horn near Tony's ear, and Tony goes ballistic again.
Yeah, loud noises set him off, as will play out in the movie. He throws a punch at Vic. Arlene tries to stop him, and she gets punched accidentally.
And Tony does some quick introspection at this point and realizes that he might just have to see this Dr. Brandon.
Yeah, Arlene looks like really shocked that she got, tagged in the chin by her boyfriend. And everyone, the whole gang is just staring at him like, "You monster."
So we cut to Dr. Brandon's office and we see him with his assistant, Dr. Wagner.
Yes, assistant/accomplice.
So next day, Tony has paid a visit to Dr. Brandon, and Dr. Brandon is there with his assistant, Dr. Wagner, and they're giving Tony the medical once-over.
Yes, checking out his vitals, and apparently inspecting his body, because...
Dr. Brandon might have plans for him.
Yeah. Okay, so they give Tony a sedative, and then Dr. Brandon and Dr. Wagner have a private talk, and that's where we find out Dr. Brandon's true plans.
I'm not sure we know what his true plans are or his motivations are, but he's going to do some sort of experiment with Tony.
Yes, he's combining his own serum with a drug called scopolamine, which is actually for like motion sickness and dizziness. And he's going to use that to revert Tony to his primitive state.
And he believes that Tony is the perfect guinea pig for this experiment because he's basically a lost cause. With his anger issues, there's no future for him. He's never going to amount to anything. So if this doesn't work out, it will be no big loss for society.
Right. Maybe he's just saving him from the gas chamber, basically, he thinks. And he also, in the physical examination, he noticed that he's got certain marks on his body that tell him that this is the right specimen. He really dehumanizes Tony here. He thinks of him as basically a means to an end. And his grand philosophy is that he can save the world by basically giving us a do-over and reverting all people to their primitive state.
So Tony is injected with this cocktail, and by counting backwards from 100, he is regressed to the age of 12.
Yes, he has a memory here of beating up a bigger kid on the beach who stole his toys. And I think Dr. Brandon gets really excited about this sort of savagery that Tony exhibited at a young age.
At this point, Dr. Brandon awakens Tony and sends him home.
But he tells him to come back in 2 days. So when Tony returns, we do the same thing with the hypnosis again. This time he's counted back as far as 11. And then Dr. Brandon says, "Where are you?" And all he knows is that he's really small and that it's very dark.
And he's alone.
Right. It's dark and cold and he's scared.
At this point, Dr. Brandon starts to describe Tony's primitive self to him.
Right, and wants to get him excited about reverting to that.
And then we're back at the haunted house.
Right, and Vic is back on the bongos.
And the people there take note that Tony's just not himself today. He's kind of sluggish.
Yeah, he's kind of morose and glum, and I guess as opposed to his normal, like, angry, fist-throwing self, he's just kind of standing off by himself.
It's getting late. Everybody has to be home by midnight with their curfews, and he's going to drive Arlene home, and they offer Frank a ride.
Frank is the only single guy in the group, so he doesn't want to be with the lovebirds, so he decides he'll take the shortcut through the woods home, which comes out by the power station. Big mistake, Frank. Big mistake.
Yes, because as he's walking through the woods, he hears the sounds of maybe someone following him. There's shuffling sounds, and he calls out, "Hello? Who's there?" But nobody responds. He continues on, but at a faster clip, and he trips and falls.
And after he falls, he looks up and he sees something is closing in for the kill and pins him up against a tree and attacks him. And he screams and fade to black.
The next day at the police station, Frank's body has been discovered in the woods, and they are looking at photos of the corpse.
Yeah, the mutilated remains. So the people here are Sergeant Donovan and Officer Chris Stanley, that's Guy Williams. And they're trying to figure out what could have caused the death because it doesn't look like any kind of weapon made the slashes on either side of his throat. Obviously wasn't a shooting. It doesn't look like a knife wound.
It might be fangs.
Yeah, which, kind of raises an eyebrow. But they're not looking for zebras here. They're looking for horses. They want to investigate to see if there's any circuses in town, any private menageries, any, reports of farm animals being mutilated. So they send out the police to sort of investigate that line of inquiry.
And to keep things quiet during this investigation, they decide they're going to lock up these photos.
So that nobody, I guess, are people just tromping through the police station looking at stuff.
And before Officer Chris locks them up, Peppy the janitor stops by and would like to take a look at the photos.
He knew Frank. Actually knew Frank's dad. They played Pinochle together. So he has sort of a private interest in the case. And then once he sees the pictures, though, he knows exactly what the cause of death is.
Yes, this is obviously a werewolf kill.
Which he knows from the people in his homeland have spread these legends around of werewolves, somewhere in the Carpathian Mountains. He says that the legend is when the evil eye is on you, the savage beast gets inside you.
The story breaks, and it does appear in the newspaper as a teen in the neighborhood was killed.
Yeah, mysterious death.
And the kids are reading this in the paper.
Another person who read it is Dr. Brandon. And while Dr. Wagner is kind of saying, no, you know Tony did this, but Dr. Brandon's like, oh no, got to have proof. He's not going to take anything on just, supposition.
Yeah, and so Dr. Brandon is going to continue his experiments.
Yeah, and Tony comes in and he begs for help because Tony knows that something weird happens. I don't think he remembers exactly what he did, but he has this sort of flash memory of doing something beastly. And he knows Frank is dead, so he's putting 2 and 2 together here.
And so Tony's put under for another session with Dr. Brandon. And we cut to the police investigation. They are looking at a map, and they have circled this area where the haunted house is located.
Right, and they're going to kind of spread out from there, I guess. They've assumed that on the basis of this one kill, that it's the teenagers that are the target here.
That's kind of weird.
I know. It's like they have one case and they've, basically...
But it helps the movie move along faster, I guess. So that's important.
Yes. Thank you for advancing the plot.
So now we're at the high school, and we see Teresa practicing the parallel bars.
Yes,
she's a gymnast.
And, this is the actress that was also a Playboy model, and she's very flexible. But she's staying after school. Her instructor or her coach leaves her alone in the gym. And who else is in school? Tony.
Yeah, Tony has a meeting with Miss Ferguson, his principal. And the meeting goes pretty well. She's impressed with the changes that have been going on since he's been seeing Dr. Brandon, and she says that she will be recommending him to State College.
Yes, and he's really excited. I guess since he's getting all his aggression outside of school, he's able to focus on his studies and not getting angry and into fights in school.
So Tony leaves and his head's held high. He's actually feeling good for once. But as he passes the gym, he sees Teresa in there practicing and stops for a gawk.
Yeah, he has a good long gawk. He actually sort of sidles into the gym and stands in the corner, and he's, watching her sort of predatorily. He's got a predatory gaze on his face as he watches her flex on the parallel bars.
But then something happens. The school bell goes off.
Yeah, it's right behind. It's always something behind him, something from behind the trumpet blast, someone coming from behind him to tap him on the shoulder. You got to have that face-to-face approach with Tony, or else he's going to go nuts, which he does.
And it does. It sets him off, and he changes to his primitive self.
Yeah, and here's where we see sort of this is probably not the best transformation, even for the 50s. It basically is just sort of like a series of wipes where he gets progressively hairier and fangier, and then he looks like a guy in a werewolf with a werewolf mask and gloves. It's not great special effects. I mean, not, American Werewolf in London, Oscar-worthy kind of stuff, but I'm sure it was great at the time.
And Teresa's still working those bars and sees him in an upside-down POV.
Oh, yeah, that's really funny. And she flips. She screams. And she's pretty fast. She tries to run away, but he's, keeps up with her. And they scuffle. She runs onto the stage. I guess it's like an auditorium/gym. And she runs up on the stage, runs into the piano, knocks over some chairs, and gets tangled up in the curtains, at which point he murders her.
Catches up to her, and it looks like he kind of just throttles her.
Yeah, he's not really eating them. He's not really
So if he was clawing at them, maybe I could see the wounds on the neck, because they will describe them as being the same.
But it's sort of the same thing that a cat does when it needs you. It's, it's sort of that same move. But no matter, she's dead.
But there are people who've heard the screams, and Miss Ferguson is among the first to arrive, and several students run in as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of Tony's friends are there. And they recognize him because he's in the same outfit. He's still wearing his letter jacket. So they know who it is. They just can't believe their eyes. They can't really figure out what's happening here. I think you could make a case here that he just put on a werewolf mask and strangled a girl. I mean, you don't have to go to the supernatural yet.
But that's not what they do. Everybody's really inclined to believe, okay, this is a werewolf. This is so obvious. And the evidence would suggest that, I guess, if you got wounds with fangs, but this isn't public knowledge at this point.
No, nobody knows. They haven't read that in the paper yet. They will, but for right now.
But they just know what they've seen. And I guess it's the police who actually put that together and first agreed that, hey.
Oh, yeah, werewolf.
Werewolf. We'll go with that.
Okay, so now the press is involved. The reporter comes in. He's berating the police for keeping this secret because, maybe they could have saved somebody. But he's going to go ahead and publish the story and interview all involved.
And they're all going to agree to use the term werewolf.
Yeah, there's I don't know, in most movies, people don't want to believe it. And everyone's like, no, it can't be until, they're actually getting killed by a werewolf. And then they're like, oh, yeah, now I believe.
It's the only rational explanation is the irrational. I guess we'll have to go with it.
It is zebras, not horses.
I mean, the kids in Miss Ferguson saw a werewolf, and the wounds are those that a werewolf might give. Ask Peppy.
So the cops want to interview Dr. Brandon because through the principal, they know that Tony has been seeing him.
And Brandon is the only one who is reluctant to use the term werewolf.
Yes, he does describe the legends from the Carpathian Mountains himself, but he considers it a fantasy, and he deals only in facts.
Yeah, he's a man of science.
Right.
And plus he's trying to throw people off the track because he knows he's involved.
He's responsible. He's not just involved. He did this. So Pepe's back on the case, and he kind of throws a little "I told you so" at the police. He says in the old country they have never caught a werewolf, so there's no way to know what to do next.
And we see that Werewolf Tony is still on the lam. He's running through the forest and just trying to stay out of sight.
Meanwhile, the cops and reporters are talking to Arlene and her family, and also there's a police officer stationed with Tony's dad.
They're asking Tony's father about Tony's character, and he says that Tony is generally a good boy as long as you don't catch him off guard.
You have to ask him to do stuff in the right way, but if you do, then he's obedient. And I presume that means you have to approach him from the front. Don't sneak up on him.
And we see that Werewolf Tony is still on the lam. He's running through the forest still and staying out of sight.
Well, he has those canny animal instincts that keep him from getting discovered. And he will not be discovered until he leaves the woods. Okay, so there's a manhunt. Parents are warned to keep their teens inside. All the teenage hangouts are closed. School is closed. And they are going into the woods around the haunted house. And they form a posse so that they can round him up. They basically want to catch him in a net. So they're doing sort of this circular pattern where they're going to drive him into the center of the woods so that they can surround him and capture him.
They're armed with torches that they are going to light as they get closer to the center of the woods because their logic is animals are afraid of fire, so maybe werewolves are too.
Yeah, it has no effect on Tony, though. But what does find Tony is a German Shepherd who Tony wrestles with for a while. There's a real dog in there, but then also there's a stuffed animal in there that he's kind of hugging and rolling around with. But he kills the dog off screen. But yes, the dog does die in this one.
Yeah, we do hear the death throes of the dog.
Yes. But also the posse hears the dog yipping, and they sort of zero in on where Tony might be. But he gets away. All he has to do is basically hide in a bush, and they just can't see him. They won't see him unless he's standing in front of them, basically.
Yeah, we don't know what the school colors are because it's a black and white film, but I guess we can assume that the jacket is green because it camouflages really well.
Very much.
So the two men who find him, one of them is Donovan, and they report back to tell everyone what they saw. And the whole time, Werewolf Tony is stalking them carefully from the bushes.
Right. Back at Tony's house, the cops are with Tony's dad. When he receives a call, they recommend if it's Tony, tell him to turn himself in, but it's really just his job saying, yeah, it's okay to take a my son is a werewolf personal day.
And he's just hopeful that Tony is still alive at this point because he's been missing and he's concerned about his son.
So it's the next morning. Tony has been de-wolfed.
He reverts back to his human form and he wakes up in the bushes and he seems very confused, a little groggy maybe.
Yeah, how did I get here?
And he sees the police are still searching the area.
But he manages to elude them yet again.
He's sneaky.
He's sneaky, but also the police are really bad at their job. Let's just be honest here. We wouldn't have a movie if they were good at catching their man or wolf.
And we're back at Dr. Brandon's office, and Wagner is confronting him again about what he's doing to Tony. At this point, there's been 2 murders and a dog that probably nobody knows about yet. But Wagner knows that this has to stop.
Dr. Brandon expects that Tony will have no choice but to come see him soon. And so he's, kind of excited to continue his experiment or, kind of see where it goes. So he's looking forward to that.
And Tony is now out of the woods.
Not only literally, not figuratively.
And is, I guess, downtown of their small town and is walking the streets. And he stops to check out his reflection in the carpet store window. And he hasn't shaven in a day. And he's kind of disgusted by his own reflection.
He doesn't look any different to me, though. His hair is still like the perfect pompadour.
Somebody thinks so, too, because there's another man there, and he just starts staring.
He gets a side eye from a fellow pedestrian.
So Tony starts walking off, and a police siren goes off briefly, and it's another noise, so he's startled, and he knows he's being looked for by the police. So he wants to just get out of the
He hides
area.
in the doorway, yeah.
And then he decides to go across the street. He sees a payphone. He's going to make a phone call.
Yeah, the police was actually someone pulling over a motorist, so it had nothing to do with him. So he spots a payphone, and he wants to dash across the street and make a call. And the cop yells at him.
Because he's jaywalking.
Yeah, another fine example of our men in blue getting the job done.
So he's let off with a warning, and next time use the crosswalk. Tony goes over to the payphone and calls Arlene. Now we see the police still at Arlene's place with her parents, and they're ready to trace any phone call that is placed to them.
So Arlene answers the phone and says, hello, hello. It sounds like she can't hear anything, and we see Tony in the phone booth. It doesn't look like he's saying anything, or if he does, he's just mouthing something that we can't hear. But apparently she heard the word hello. That's what she tells the cops, but she didn't recognize the voice. But anyway, Tony hangs up on her and runs away because someone's staring at him through the phone booth window.
Yeah, it used to just be he didn't like to be touched. Now he just doesn't like to be looked at.
Can you blame him?
Well, no, he doesn't want to be seen because he's wanted.
He's a fugitive.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So Arlene is chastised for not doing a better job answering the phone.
Yeah, the police are quick to judge, but not themselves. But the civilians just aren't helping out here.
But the police are given a tip. I think the guy in the phone booth recognized him.
Yeah, and calls in the tip, and then they know his general location. But all things lead back to Dr. Brandon. So Tony is the first to arrive at Dr. Brandon's. He begs Dr. Brandon to help him. He doesn't want to be a werewolf, but he doesn't want to be seen as a werewolf. He doesn't want people to see him in his monstrous form.
And Dr. Brandon realizes that his experiments are successful, but he needs proof, so he's going to bring about the transformation one more time. But this time, he's going to film it.
Well, yeah, you have to. I mean, who would believe just your word of mouth? But, when you get that viral video going, everyone's going to be like, oh, wow, werewolf.
Well, we saw it earlier, and the transition wasn't that believable, even seeing it with our own eyes.
Right. But, maybe 50s audiences are more credible. I don't know. So basically, Dr. Brandon wants credit for the first perfect case of regression on film, obviously.
So Dr. Wagner's working the camera, and Tony is made to transform one more time.
But this time, in full view of Dr. Brandon and Wagner and the camera. Unfortunately, at this point, the phone rings. And I have to say, when I was listening to all these phones ringing in the movie, it's kind of startling me, too. Like, it kind of got my back up. Like, I don't miss the days when we had, those kind of phones ringing off the wall.
Right after the transformation, Tony, he looks angry in his werewolf state, but he's not aggressive. He's just sitting there until that phone goes off.
And as we know, we can't have loud noises around Tony or werewolf Tony.
So Tony lunges at Dr. Wagner, and there's quickly the end of Dr. Wagner. He's disposed of.
Right. Oh, he also destroys the camera, and the film pops out, so there's not going to be any photographic evidence.
And then he turns on Dr. Brandon. And Dr. Brandon's trying to convince him that they're friends. He's trying to talk him down.
Meanwhile, he's pulling a syringe out, so I guess he wants to counteract the werewolf.
Well, it might just be another sedative. It might just be to knock him out. Yeah, that
could be. He could be just trying to, but it doesn't matter because nothing happens. He never gets to deploy it.
So Tony attacks, and Dr. Brandon's time of this earth is finished.
And then the police arrive.
Yep, I guess the tip they received, they realized it was close enough to Dr. Brandon's office that must be the first place to look, because they show up and see Tony in his werewolf state and immediately start unloading bullets on him.
Yeah, because they had no choice. I mean, what else can you do? So, yeah, they blast him. Tony falls to the ground. Off camera, he de-wolfs again. So you see him as his perfect angelic self lying on the floor.
And they see Dr. Brandon lying there and somehow are able to put two and two together with what happened. And maybe it's a shame Dr. Brandon was killed, but there might be some kind of karma involved.
Yeah. And then they delivered the perfect closing line.
It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
Yes, which is, sort of like it's always a comeuppance that mad scientists get at the end of these movies, where, he tampered in God's domain or whatever, and you get what's coming to you if you try to interfere in the natural way of things.
And that is the story of I Was a Teenage Werewolf. So we're talking about I Was a Teenage Werewolf from 1957.
And this is the first time that there was a film portraying a teenager as the monster. This is sort of like Samuel Arkoff's kind of own invention, which I guess he got a lot of guff for, but it actually was pretty successful. This movie was produced at a cost of $150,000, but went on to gross $2 million. And that made it one of the most successful films ever released by AIP.
And this originally played on a double bill with Invasion of the Saucermen. And I think it might be this pairing that gave AIP its real identity as the company that it was to become.
Yes, they have their own theme. Basically, their movies have a certain quality, and I think that really drove it home. Like, you've got the teenagers, you've got the monsters, you've got the thrills and chills, and that's just sort of a hallmark of what AIP movies are.
Up to this point, they were doing a lot of just plain exploitation movies with teenagers and rock and roll and war movies and occasional westerns, and there wasn't anything really defining about them that was different until this pairing.
And this wasn't the only teenage monster movie. It was shortly followed by I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and Blood of Dracula, which is about a teen girl who is transformed into a monster, a werewolf-like vampire. And then it was also followed in 1958 by How to Make a Monster, which is about two young actors being hypnotized to kill while in makeup as monster characters, Teenage Werewolf and Teenage Frankenstein.
Yeah, it's kind of a pseudo-sequel to both films.
Yeah, and sort of like a meta, version of,
And we'll talk about it one day.
Yes, we will. And this is the first movie. You've probably heard the I Was a Teenage Something as the title of a movie, a TV show episode, or it's just a major pop culture theme, and this is where it originated.
And Whit Bissell, who played Dr. Brandon in this film, would go on to play Dr. Frankenstein in I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. And he's kind of the quintessential mad scientist of the era. He played a similar character in a few Universal films. And he's kind of what I picture when I think of the generic mad scientist.
He's not like crazy wild-haired scientist. He's very calm, cool, and collected. But he's also very driven by his own sort of mad ideology, that he's going to create a perfect world by making werewolves out of all of us. But, he's very convinced and convincing that this is the way to go.
Yeah, his science does leave a lot to be desired.
Yeah, and his philosophy, like, I don't really get what happens after we're all werewolves. Like, who's going to run the power plants? Who's going to, drive the taxis? How are we going to get to do all the things that need to be done?
Werewolves don't use taxis.
I know, but like, are we all just going to abandon our homes and live in the woods and kill livestock, or
eat our young?
Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't seem like a plan for saving the world. I'm sorry. I
want to know how someone's primitive state is a werewolf.
Well, I think that's just Tony's primitive state. So everyone has their own primitives. Like, you could be a leopard, or
I like that better.
Yeah, I was a teenage leopard man. I would like to be a bear. No. But yes, we were all beasts at one point. I don't know, maybe I was a jellyfish. but we all can revert back. Like it's like de-evolution. But I still don't see how that's a good thing and how that advances mankind. I guess we have to re-evolve after that, and then
maybe we'll do better the second time around.
Yeah, we get a cosmic do-over thanks to. I don't know. Is he gonna like dose the water supply like they did in Wild in the Streets, except instead of LSD, it's this regression formula? I don't think he thought this all the way through, and it definitely is not a peer-reviewed
That's
study.
a bigger movie, and I'm kind of into it. I'd like to see that.
Well, that's what the sequel should have been.
What happens if Whit Bissell is successful?
Yeah, we are all teenage werewolves and vampires and Frankensteins. And just for fun, Jeff and I watched an episode of Highway to Heaven, which is sort of Michael Landon's last project, and he plays an angel. And this episode was called I Was a Middle-Aged Werewolf. And it involves characters in the movie watching this movie, I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and Michael Landon, once again, donning the werewolf get-up to scare some bad kids on Halloween. That was kind of fun.
It wasn't very good.
No. Well, I never watched that show before, so.
Well, I had seen that episode, but that's the only episode I'd ever seen before.
I can say the same thing now. I've never watched it until then.
And I've seen it twice.
But, just the references to this movie, like you actually see Michael Landon in werewolf drag on the television screen within the context of the show.
The episode was written and directed by Michael Landon.
So what are your final thoughts on I Was a Teenage Werewolf, Jeff?
I don't know. Talking about it is a lot of fun.
Yes. Watching it is not so much.
I would agree with that. I was kind of disappointed. I hadn't seen this movie in a very long time. And it was kind of a holy grail for a long time because of its history. It's one of the handful of films that is owned currently by Susan Hart, who is the widow of James Nicholson. And she owns a handful of these films and is kind of holding them hostage. She's asking an obscene amount of money to license them out, and nobody's willing to pay for that because these films, let's face it, are going to have a limited audience, and it's getting more limited every day as these films are in danger of being forgotten.
It was an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000, and that's how I saw it. But I don't think you can even get that episode anymore, can you?
It never had a legitimate release on video. I Was a Teenage Werewolf did have one in the early 90s on VHS on the RCA Columbia Drive-In Classics label where they released a handful of these films, like this one, It Conquered the World, and a few others. But those weren't in print for very long and are considered collector's items today. But because of that one release, the movie is available. There are bootleg copies ripped from the VHS. You can find it easily enough on YouTube or the Internet Archive. In that case, if you want to see it, it's probably one of the more accessible ones.
Right. It's just not, officially accessible.
It doesn't look that great.
No, it has a really smudgy, the black and white is really shadowy. Days. Yeah. It's just not a nice clean copy, not a clean print of the movie. It's very murky and smudgy looking, and I don't enjoy watching that.
It could use an 8K restoration.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
4K is the norm, but it could use an 8K.
Yeah.
It's worthy, I think. Historically, as an entertainment, I'm going to give it an I on our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic.
It's definitely an I for me, too.
Which is disappointing to me because I was really looking forward to revisiting this one. And in retrospect, I think that was more based on its legendary status because it was so unobtainable for so long.
And also the title. I mean, the title promises...
It's iconic.
Yeah, the title is iconic. It promises an exciting adventure. And what happens, it's sort of a melodrama. Troubled teen, he kind of goes to the wrong person for help, and everyone ends up dead because of it. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a sad story. It's no happy endings here, except for no more teenagers are going to be murdered. But other than that, it's bad news for everyone.
And I'd say the performances are all top-notch for a low-budget film. Michael Landon is very emotional.
He's very compelling as a troubled teen, and you really feel for him. But he needs like a legitimate psychotherapist and not a crazy mad scientist to help him.
And the supporting cast is interesting. We get to see Guy Williams, who we'd see more later on. It's fascinating to see him in this earlier role. Barney Phillips is notable as Detective Sergeant Donovan. He's very believable, except he's so easy to accept the idea that werewolves must be a thing.
No, but I do admire his compassionate nature, and his approach to troubled teens is to try to get them help and not just to try and round them up and throw them all in the clink. So it's a surprisingly humane performance, and just a small role, and you're basically the functionary here of the police officer. But I think he does a great job. And
Whit Bissell is always great in everything he's ever done. He's not quite chewing the scenery here, but you kind of get the feeling that he's relishing his position as being this nutty guy. Right. He's definitely drunk on his own power. In character, he's drunk on his own power. But as an actor, he portrays that masterfully. And the other kids, Yvonne Lime is Arlene. Yeah, she's a real sweetheart. And I love Cindy Robbins as Pearl. She and Vic do a little dance routine. That's one of my favorite parts. It's so much fun watching them. She looks so happy when she's doing that dance. And they're so good. He's, singing and dancing, and it's, the synchronized performance. And it's just really cute. They're really cute kids. They, there's no bad seeds here. Not even Tony, although he kills one of them. But, what? Two. He kills, that's right. He kills two of them. Because Teresa is part of the gang before her, unfortunate demise on the parallel bars. Mm-hmm. And Ken Miller is just interesting to watch because his obsession with the bongos is intriguing enough and amusing. Well, I had the same obsession when I was like 11, but I got over it because I wasn't very good. But yeah, he's like a soft-spoken, kind of happy-go-lucky guy. The whole quick gang. To sing a song, which we like in a teen. I was surprised that he didn't go on to, have more of a musical career, just because that seems to be the trajectory. When somebody sings a song in a movie, it's because they're promoting something outside of the movie. But that doesn't seem to be the case. I couldn't find a copy of this. I can't remember if he sings in Puppet People or not. Oh, well, I guess we'll have to table that. Well, as we mentioned, this played on a double bill with Invasion of the Saucermen. And as a kid in the 50s, this would be something that I would be really anxious to go see. Oh, yeah. This would be a terrific date night movie at the drive-in with your friends, with your best girl or guy. Invasion of the Saucermen is a comedy. And so that would probably be like a good palate cleanser after the doom and gloom of this movie. Yeah, I don't think it was actually billed as a comedy. It played up the creatures, the cabbage heads, a lot in their advertising. And I guess they're funny looking, but they could also be scary, I suppose. I don't know. I think it was a comedy. I don't think they intended it to be a comedy, but then they kind of realized it had comedic leanings and they decided to go with that. And the creatures looked kind of ridiculous. They sure did. They were like little people with giant heads. But that's a talk for another episode of the American International Podcast. Yeah, so we hope you come back. Until then, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot. And I'm Jeff Markin. And we'll meet you at the drive-in. Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast. The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.